reporting live from a little bungalow colony in Cleveland. This is where we live. It's the final moments of Gimble Tamuz, of the Rebbe's 30th yahrzeit. I wanted to share 2 stories and a message that I just recently heard in the last 24 hours. And start with the stories. Rabbi Label Groner was the Rebbe's primary secretary, personal secretary, for all the time, the whole time the Rebbe was Rebbe. And his son came to Cleveland a few days ago, brought down by one of the local Chabad shuls, and he related the story that he was present. He saw this with his own eyes. Long story short, there was a young boy and a girl who were in love, and the girl was from Holland, Dutch, blonde, blue eyes. She looked perfectly German, and the boy was a Jew, and he looked Jewish. And she was madly in love with him, and she asked him to marry her. He said, "There's one line I draw. I need to marry someone Jewish so that my parents raised me." And he said, "If you convert, I'll marry you." Long story short, without getting into the whole conversion issue, she said, like converting for marriage doesn't really work, etc. But she had another problem. Her parents were from the Nazi party. They were sworn Nazis. And she says, if we mention the word Jew in our home, hell breaks loose. I can never even entertain the thought. But she still wanted to stay connected, and they remained connected. A few months later, the opportunity somehow evolved where he invited her to come see the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 770 at a Farbrengen, at a Hasidic gathering. So she comes and she sees the incredible energy, the Rebbe talking for hours, the people singing with enthusiasm. And she walks out, she says, "I want to meet this man. I need to have an audience with him in person." She says, "What? Really?" Okay. They go to the secretary, Rabbi Groner, and I heard the story from his son, who was there at the time. And she says, "I want to meet with the Rebbe." "Sure, no problem. Get in line." And this wasn't the days where people actually met face to face, one-on-one with the Rebbe before it became just impossible, and he started giving out dollars instead. So she scheduled a meeting for a month or 2 later. She comes into the Rebbe and she says, "Rebbe, I see what's going on over here." She says, She says, "I have this boy, a Jewish boy, who I want to marry, madly in love with him, but he won't marry unless I convert. I want you to convince him to let him marry me." And she tells the story why she can't convert, because her parents are Nazis and they hate Jews with the passion, and every time the word Jew comes into the house, it's a bad scene. The Rebbe looks at her, unbelievable, and he says, "You're not Jewish?" Silence. And he says, "You are Jewish. Ask your mother." Just like that. Ask your mother. You won't have to convert. The Rebbe said, "You're already Jewish. you might need to go to the mikvah to remove some impurities that you were associated with in living as a non-Jew, but you won't need to convert. She comes back to her mother. She asks her, not a very strong data connection here, so I'm going backwards. So she asks her mother, what's going on? And she says, are we Jewish? And she starts cursing her and quieting her. Absolutely not. How could you say such a thing? And don't ever dare talk like that. And she chases her out of the house. She's very, very angry. A few days later, her mother calls her to a quiet meeting in the park. And she says, you should know, since you asked, Father was afraid when Hitler came to power. He was afraid of Hitler. He was young at the time, and we moved locations, and he swore that he'll never identify as a Jew again. But we are Jewish. But you can't tell Father that I'm telling you this. Otherwise he will divorce me or maybe kill me. So this is a secret between me and you, and it has to remain that way. She was Jewish. How did the Rebbe know? This is what I ask you. That's what I ask myself. That was one story. Long story short, they get married, and they did get married, Baruch Hashem, and people know who they are. They live in Israel right now, and she still has her blonde hair and blue eyes, and looks German, and I guess somehow it remains somewhat of a secret among some people. Some people still don't know that she moved into the Jewish community. They think she disappeared or some spooky story like that. But anyway, the Rebbe knew the soul. The Rebbe sees souls. Next story, a little bit of a less dramatic story, but everyone knows this. The Midrash explains how Moshe became chosen as the leader of the Jewish people. And it says that he was a shepherd, like many of the forefathers, and he once chased a little sheep that fled the flock, and he ran after it to find out what's going on, to bring it back, and he saw that it was thirsty, and he picked it up lovingly, brought it to the water, said, had I known you were thirsty, I would have taken much better care of you. And God saw the empathy that he had even for a little sheep, for a single sheep, not just the whole flock. And Hashem said, this is the kind of person we need as a leader, someone who's truly empathetic and cares for even every single one. In a similar vein, there's a story about a family who came to celebrate the month of Tishrei, the high holiday season, with the Rebbe. And they're talking about 5,000 to 10,000 people who are there, everyone inching their way in, trying to get a glimpse of the Rebbe in different times, in different spaces and places, and different prayers and rituals. After the whole month, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, people were able to meet with the Rebbe in person and ask for a blessing, etc. This one family came, and the Rebbe asks them, tell me, your son, they had a 12-year-old boy, your son, does he wear glasses or not? Startled by the question, the Rebbe continued and said, on Rosh Hashanah, while I was blowing shofar, I noticed he was wearing glasses. At the end of the month, on Simchas Torah, when everybody was dancing, he wasn't wearing glasses. Does he need glasses or not? This is the Rebbe's question. So the Rebbe noticed a 12-year-old boy, a first-timer, with glasses, without glasses. So many stories like this. Stories galore. And here I'll take a little commercial break for, oh dear, look at this. This is Cleveland. A deer on a regular house lawn. You want to hear a story from the Rebbe? Oh dear, my dear. Okay. So, continuing. A thought. Shalom Aleichem. So, another thought that's related. What do these stories mean, and why are they important? Why are they important? What is a Rebbe? Etc. Of course, these are thoughts and questions that take a lifetime to answer. But trying to do in the next 3 minutes, I want to try to encapsulate an idea, a thought. The Rebbe was a neshama klalis, a general soul. What is a general soul? It's a soul that contains within it all the rest of the souls of the Jewish people, and by extension the universe. And because of that, he feels and knows them. He knows them because he knows himself. That's how the Rebbe could feel and know if somebody's Jewish or not, what kind of soul they have, and also whether or not somebody needs glasses. From the top to the bottom. Moving on. A little parallel between Yaakov, Avinu, our forefather Jacob, and the Rebbe. When Yaakov was going to pass away, Yaakov, our forefather, he asked his son Yosef to bring his two children, Menashe and Ephraim, to bless. Menashe was the older one, Ephraim was the younger one. Yosef named his two children based on his personal experience in Egypt. Menashe means I was torn away and I long for the time that I could be with the times that I was with my father. I used to be with my father. I was torn away. Nashani Elokim Beisavi. Hashem yanked me out of my father's household, said Yosef, because he was in Egypt, away from his family, and he longed to be there. That was the first son. So it expressed his sentiment. His second son, Ephraim, Yifrani Elokim Be'eretz Ani. It was the gratitude that God made me successful here and now in Egypt. Yosef was now the second in command. He was the viceroy in Egypt and second only to Pharaoh. And Yosef was grateful. So he named the second child in that gratitude. Menashe first, he was older. Ephraim was younger. Today, people today are also part of these two camps, Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe is the camp that saw the Rebbe, lived with the Rebbe, experienced the Rebbe in person. And the Rebbe was yanked away from us. We were yanked away from him. It's Menashe. And then there's today, most people are successful in their own way. Whether it's in a business, whether it's the Hasidim of the Rebbe, or emissaries of the Rebbe, shluchim of the Rebbe, out there doing wonderful things with their communities. That's Ephraim. Ephraim means they're grateful. They express their gratitude for succeeding in the Rebbe's mission and fulfilling the Rebbe's mission. When it came time for Yaakov to bless his grandchildren on his deathbed, he said to Yosef, he said, bring me Menashe and Ephraim. Lihim, they're mine. They're my children. They're mine just like Reuben and Shimon. What was he saying? He's saying these children who were raised in exile, raised away without my influence, yet observing the way I do and I did. These are my children. These are my kids. They're mine like my own children. When it came time for him to bless them, traditionally, they would put the hands on the heads of the children to bless them. People still do that today. Yaakov was meant to put his right hand on the older one, Menashe, and his left hand on the younger one, Ephraim. But he switched his hands. A famous story in the Torah. Yaakov switched his hands and put his right hand, demonstrating dominance and strength and authority, on the younger son, on Ephraim, and his left hand on Menashe. What was the message there? And of course, there's a literal meaning. Yaakov said, the younger one will be greater than the older one, etc. The Hasidic perspective, and how it relates to us right now, was that Yaakov was saying, it's not about lamenting the past. It's not about saying, oy vey, we had a Rebbe. Oy vey, look what kind of beautiful stories we know abound. Stories abound. Hundreds and thousands and millions of stories about the Rebbe. It's not about that. It's about what am I doing right now to live like the Rebbe. How am I embodying the Rebbe in my life, in my day-to-day life? What am I doing like the Rebbe? That's the story. That's what Ephraim is. Ephraim is, Menashe was, I long for the olden days. And here's a great story. Let me tell you a story about the Rebbe. Ephraim is, I am the Rebbe. I'm living the Rebbe. I'm experiencing the Rebbe. The world is experiencing the Rebbe through me. And that's the challenge that we have today on the 30th year site of the Rebbe, is to ask ourselves and to apply ourselves to this idea. Not that, oh, I heard another great story about the Rebbe. Wow, he was a visionary. Wow, he was able to see souls. Wow, he was able to care for a kid with glasses or without. No, it's me. All these stories about me and you, and all these great lessons that we hear about the Rebbe. How are we living them? How are we experiencing them in our life? And even more important, how are we transmitting them to the next generation? How are we continuing the legacy? The Rebbe lives through you, through me, through anyone who follows his ways. And the only way you can truly follow his ways is by studying his Torah, by gaining a perspective and gaining the Rebbe's perspective, seeing the world through the Rebbe lens. What would the Rebbe say? What would the Rebbe do? What would the Rebbe think? This is really our mission and our goal right now in this 30th yahrzeit. And I'm urging myself, talking to myself while I'm talking to you, whoever will listen. How am I going to channel the Rebbe? The Rebbe said about the previous Rebbe, and it was said about Yaakov, the first Yaakov, that he never died. He never died. Yaakov Avinu lo meis. And the Rebbe, the Gemara, the Tamuz says, Mazaro b'chaim, afu b'chaim. As long as his children live, as long as his children are alive and following his footsteps, he too is alive. Same with the Rebbe. The Rebbe said that about the previous Rebbe, and we know that about the Rebbe. Did the Rebbe pass away? Did the Rebbe die? It depends on us. It depends on me and you and this generation. As long as we continue his ways, the Rebbe's alive. And this is what This is the takeaway from today. How will I keep the Rebbe alive? Every inspirational thought, story, song, or dance that you heard from the Rebbe or about the Rebbe, how will I implement that in my life and see the world the way the Rebbe did, see others the way the Rebbe did? Well, how will I apply it IRL in real life? I'm thinking about it, and I hope you are too. God bless you.